So I thought in this video we'd take a look at what it takes to install the ELF OS onto the COSMAC ELF2000. In the COSMAC ELF2000 User's Manual, there's a section, obviously, on installing ELF OS that kind of goes through the information you need. It mentions Mike Riley's website and a file called ELF2K.hex. We'll go look at that website here in a minute and grab the files. And then it kind of just goes through the various steps here, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, I've had all kinds of trouble getting this to work. I think I've figured out all of my issues and can explain them. But let's start by taking a look at Mike Riley's website, which I have up here. If you just search Mike Riley ELF OS, you'll find his website here, or you can just go to elfemulation.com. All kinds of notes here. The BIOS that's required for the ELF OS is built into the ROM on the ELF2K. Apparently Mike worked with Bob Armstrong to make that happen. But what you get down to here is various downloads. And there's two here that appear to be for the ELF2000. They're version 2.6 and version 2.8. I've downloaded both of those. I've read through the bits and pieces of the manuals here, trying to get a handle on this. So let's go ahead and take a look at the downloaded files. So I've downloaded the two files here. I initially started trying to load this file here, and we'll look at in a minute how it fails. So I've got the ELF hooked up to a USB to RS-232 adapter here. It's on COM3. TerraTerm is open here. It's connected to COM3. Let's go ahead and power the ELF up. It's running through its post tests. There's 98 down to 89, to 75, to 59, to 16, and it should now be waiting for me to hit a key on the keyboard to go ahead and be connected. So one of the steps in installing ELF OS is you upload an Intel hex file to the ELF, and then you execute that file. And this is the first place where I ran into issues. So I can go in here and do a file send file. Let me find the folder right here, and we have the two files we downloaded, the version 2.6 and the version 2.8. And of course I wanted the latest version 2.8, but I'm going to go ahead and send the version 2.6 file to the ELF to show you how this should work. So this is the file directly as downloaded. And if we go in here and just simply send the file, because it's Intel hex, the ELF is recognizing the colon, 10, etc., etc., and knowing that's an Intel hex file, and it's receiving this data stream, and it's uploading it into the memory. I had to go in and add I think a 15 millisecond after every character delay and a fairly long delay after every character turn line feed, and we'll look at that here in a second, in order for the ELF to be able to keep up with the data we're sending. Because there's no handshaking here, it's easy to send stuff too fast to the ELF. Anyhow, here you can see what it looks like normally, and that's the first thing we wanted to look at. So I mentioned this just a second ago, but I'll go ahead and show you. Under Setup, Serial Port, and TerraTerm are these transmit delays. For every character that's sent to the ELF, there's a 30 millisecond delay, and then every carriage return, a new line kind of character, there's a 600 millisecond delay. And these numbers seem to give me reliable uploading to the ELF. What I want to do here is go ahead and send that second file up. So I've started the ELF up again. It's running through the Power Up Self-Test. This takes a little bit of time, and it's waiting for me to hit a character. And there it is. So we're back in, and let's go ahead and send up the later version of the file, the 2.8. So go ahead and select it. And what you'll see here on the screen is it's not acting the same. It's got into this weird state. It's not parsing things correctly. It took me a bit to figure out why this file was different from the original file, because I want the version 2.8 file uploaded on the ELF. We have to go in and fix this file. So let me close this out here and get the environment reset, and we'll look at those files. So the next thing I did was go ahead and open both of these files up in Notepad, and that's what we have going on here. And if we take the version 2.6 file, we can see it just looks like a perfectly happy little Intel hex file. But when we jump to the version 2.8 file, the formatting is completely different, and I'm looking at these directly in Notepad because it's not nearly as smart as like Notepad++, where it'll figure out the file type and display it correctly. And this was the first hint to me that there was something wrong with this file. And typically, when I see this kind of situation, it's because this file is in Unix formatting, and the good file is in MS-DOS formatting. And what I mean by Unix and MS-DOS formatting are the characters at the end of the line. For Unix, it's simply a line feed. And for DOS, it's a carriage return line feed, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but for DOS, I know it's a carriage return line feed, and I think for Unix formatted files, it's simply a line feed. So, having opened those up in Notepad, I then went ahead and jumped into Notepad++, which is a whole lot smarter here, and will give me definitely some more information. So we're looking at the version 2.6 file here. And if we go in and look at end-of-line conversion, we can see this file is a Windows format file. So Notepad++ has looked at it and said it's got carriage return line feeds. I'm happy. I know what this file is. When I go to the version 2.8 file and look at its end-of-line conversion, it says, hey, this is a Unix formatted file. This confirmed to me that the formatting of the later file is Unix. It's not MS-DOS. Now, Notepad++ is smart enough to recognize that difference and display the file correctly. So in Notepad++, looking, you'd say, well, the files are pretty much formatted the same. So you really do have to go in and look at end-of-line conversion to get a hint of what the file type is. So there's a couple of ways to deal with this. I'm going to go ahead, as I just did, I'm going to change the end-of-line conversion on the 2.8 file to Windows format, and I'm going to save this file out under a new name. Oh, well, you just witnessed it. I overwrote the file accidentally. Well, that's okay. I could always download a new copy of it. So let's close this back out. And let me get back into Notepad++ and close this out here. Or into Notepad. And let me come into Notepad, and we'll go ahead and open in Notepad the file we just accidentally updated. Desktop ELF2K. Why aren't I seeing the files here? I'm confused by... There it is, they're hex files. So I'm going to open up the ELF2K hex file. We just overwrote that and hopefully converted it to MS-DOS format. And we can validate that in just regular Notepad. And we immediately see here in regular Notepad that it's the version 2.8 file. And the end-of-line issue has been solved just by using Notepad++ and changing the file encoding. So this is a good file we should now be able to upload. So let me go ahead and close this stuff out, and we will open up TerraTerm again. We're in TerraTerm. It should be connected to serial port 3, etc., and it is. It didn't complain, so it got connected to it. Let's go ahead. I've got the ELF powered up again here. It's once again running through the self-test. It takes a few seconds to do this, and it's waiting for me to hit a character. And we're now in, the little ELF monitor. So let's go ahead and send the file that we just modified. And we're going to send the version 2.8 file up. And I expect this file to now work correctly and each line to be output and processed as we saw in the version 2.6 file. And you can see here that by changing the file internal format from Unix to MS-DOS, it's now being interpreted correctly. This will take 30 minutes or so to upload this hex file to the ELF. I'm not going to bore you with 30 minutes of video watching hexadecimal numbers scroll by. Anyhow, we'll come back when this is done. So we've got the hex file uploaded to the COSMAC ELF. It took closer to 40 minutes, I believe, to complete. And if I can get in here, we are back on the ELF here. If we take a look at the PDF, we've gone through the steps here. We've uploaded the file. And we're now sitting here with the instructions on how to actually do this. And the first thing, kind of move this off the edge of the screen here so you can kind of see everything, is to do a run 3000. And what that basically says is start execution of the program at address 3000. If we do that, we end up in this place where nothing actually works. It just hangs here and doesn't run. I'm going to go ahead and restart the ELF, pushing the reset button so we can gain back control here. And we're back. So I did a lot of playing trying to figure out why this wouldn't work. And in looking through the various monitor commands, there's a run command as we executed here, and there's a call command. So just on a fluke, I decided to call address 3000 instead. The little program here is just meant to be a standalone program. You go through all the steps and you boot into ELF-OS. Whereas I believe call is meant to call the program, and when the program finally exits, it can pop the return address back off the stack and get back to the monitor. Doing a call 3000 actually gets us into the little menu here. So this is a place where in the manual for the ELF, this should probably say call 3000 or I've got an issue. But either way, I was able to get into the tool. The other thing to notice here is that I just simply did a reset. I didn't power off and power on and re-download, and because the contents in memory were still there, we were able to do the call and execute it. So the next thing to quickly point out here is we do see an ID master device. It's a 30 megabyte A-Pacer compact flash card. I played with a lot of little compact flash cards and had varying results, none of which were really positive. I don't know if it's just really sensitive to the type of card or if there's something bigger going on. I'm kind of looking at the stack of cards here. I've got a compact 64 megabyte here. I've got two of these. I couldn't get reliable operation with the compact 64 meg. I've got a couple, a SanDisk and a Samsung 128 meg. I also kind of had weird issues with those that I never really understood. I do believe I've got a thermal issue, and we'll look at that in a later video that may be part of what was creating the unstable operation of the unit here. Anyhow, if we come back to the instructions, the first thing they have us do is initialize the hard drive or the compact flash card. So let's go ahead and do the initialize. And I'm going to do a quick format. I did a full format on this card earlier as I figured out how to do this, and that takes quite a while. We should be safe to do a quick format. So the card's formatted. It should now have an empty directory structure on it. And then we're going to initialize the file system. Actually, it's just a blank formatted card here. Let's go ahead and initialize the file system, step 2. And let this run. And it's now created a file system. It's given us information on the total allocation units and the sector for the master directory, etc. We should now actually have a formatted card. If we then move on to step 6, where we install the operating system kernel, that is step 3 here. And it says the kernel has been copied. This should now, I believe, be in a bootable state where we could boot at this point. We move on to option 4. I've had a bit of reliability issues here with option 4 where it'd hang at this point. And it's going to walk us through here and ask what commands do you actually want to download to the card. And I'm just going to step through and download all of the commands to the card. This takes a little bit of time. As I said before, this step here is step 4. I've had issues with it just hanging and getting nowhere. If I do basically a warm restart, hit the reset button, rerun the utility, and jump straight to option 4, it would typically run the second attempt. Again, I don't know if this is a reliability issue on the hardware as I've built it or something else. we'll get all the utilities loaded here. And you can see these are pretty standard DOS looking: directory command, a dump memory command, a little mini monitor, a load, free space, delete a file, hex dump, copy, rename, make directories. There is a rudimentary folder system built into this. There's an assembly command where you can assemble your own code. And this should be the last thing that it wants to download to it. So we've now moved all of the install binaries down, and we can go ahead and boot into the ELF OS. And there we are. We're in the ELF OS. It is case sensitive, as I recall. There's a bin folder. I should be able to do cd bin, chdir bin. I keep forgetting that we're now in the bin folder, and if we do a directory here, we'll see the various programs we brought down. The next thing I'll do here is a full cold restart of the machine. So I powered it off here. I'll let it sit for a second, and we'll bring the ELF back up from a cold restart. And it's running through the post tests at this point. And it's now waiting for me to hit a key to come back in. Now at this point, we're back in the ELF monitor. From here, we can do a boot, and that will boot the ELF OS. And we're back in where we were before in the ELF OS. There is a way in the manual, he calls it out, to have it auto boot on power up directly to the ELF OS. Let's go ahead and do a chdir to bin, and let's do the directory /s where we get all the details as is shown over there in the manual. And we can see that these files, obviously I don't have the real-time clock set here. I think this is the default date anyhow. But you can see that we're in, and we have basically a tiny OS here, the ELF OS running on the ELF. In an upcoming video, we're going to look at what I think is the hardware issue I've run into that had created a lot of instability on the system. But anyhow, I'll wrap this video up here. We've gotten through the install, demonstrated that it works. As I talked about, we can do the boot here as we did. We restarted, and then there's this set or restart boot command that says on a restart of the machine, auto boot into ELF OS. So hope you enjoyed, and we'll talk soon. Bye.